Hey everyone, this is Brandon Rush. Thank you for joining us for another episode of The Agent Investor. The goal of The Agent Investor is to help our audience make informed decisions in their commercial and multifamily properties and real estate through conversations with those professionals in that space. Today we have David Marasow of Upscale Construction joining us. Dave, thank you for joining us. I appreciate you coming by.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. Well, Dave is the co-founder of Upscale Construction. It's a construction management company based out of Connecticut. They are construction managers, they are developers, they are owner operators. They're a little bit of everything. Without further ado, I'm going to let Dave take over. Dave, let's jump right to it. Tell us about yourself and how you're involved in commercial real estate.
Okay, interesting. So I've been in this space as far as I remember, right out of college, right out of school, met, let's say 18, 19 years old. The first thing I got was, besides the odd and end spring jobs, I got the first real job I had was in property management. So we started in a small boutique property management firm in New York. The company that I used to work for specialized in basically buying heavy value add assets. We'd buy a lot of multifamily stuff, and we specialized in getting different government grants and government programs to essentially turn the property around. So it wasn't just like come into that property, do the basics. It was more like come in, failing roofs, boilers, parking lots, windows, the whole nine yards. Early on in the stage, I learned, real estate management, underwriting, value creation, all that stuff. But I enjoyed the real challenge of like, how do we turn this building around while it's still fully occupied? And now you have all the emotional roller coaster that you go through when you do that. There's people living there for 20, 30 years, and you suddenly come to them and tell them, yes, we're going to raise your rent a little bit, but it's going to be a little bit of pain for a little bit of time. But they'll get a new boiler, you'll have new windows, new electrical. We bought properties that had fuses, that had leaking roofs. So that's really how I got into the space. This was my first real job, and essentially been there ever since.
I got it. And then tell us how this progressed into Upscale. How did Upscale become?
Okay, so as things progressed, we went from New York. We had about 1,200 apartments. As things got real crazy in New York, as time went on, we realized that we're spending less and less time actually helping tenants and turning their assets around, and more time fighting with the city, red tape, stupid things that housing providers really don't enjoy. It's the necessary evil, but nobody likes it. So we made two test runs in New Jersey and one in Connecticut. The company decided to change route and sold off most of its properties in New York and basically transitioned to New Jersey and Connecticut. For a while, I was in New Jersey, feeling out the waters. I think we just noticed that Connecticut was more business friendly, easier to operate. There was a lot of demand. There was a lot of need for, the product we were offering at the time. This was probably 2015. And then 2018, we essentially launched Upscale. I left, the management business. We still have properties that I own and, we manage, but really the full-time focus is really Upscale Construction. Essentially, we're a full GC outfit with the ownership in mind. So we own our own property. We know what it feels like to be in the
Absolutely.
landlord position. We know what you need. A lot of owners look for a contractor that say, oh, I want you to build X, Y, and Z. But the person on the other end of the spectrum, the contractor in that regard, has no clue what's required other than a building together. They don't know what it's like to manage the building long term. They don't know where the complaints are going to come in from. So a lot of our clients come to us because they understand that we feel what it feels like to be in their shoes.
Absolutely. Good stuff. Good stuff. All right. So we're going to dive right into it. So, first question is around adaptive reuse. It's become a hot topic. What makes these projects so tricky? Where do you see the biggest opportunity in adaptive reuse?
I think the reason why it's very exciting is because as values climb and as it becomes more expensive and more complicated to buy or find good deals, you have people essentially looking outside of the regular buy box. So people say, okay, we can't find an eight cap nice multifamily deal. How do we create one? So you have some people that choose a development route, and then the people that have different opportunities, or they find different ideas that say, okay, I have this large vacant nursing home, let's call it. As we know in Connecticut, a lot of nursing homes, the small, mid-sized nursing homes went out of business over the last 10 years. I'm not in the nursing home space. I don't understand why, but that's the reality. We're finishing up our third nursing home conversion. And essentially people come to us and they say, okay, we have this large vacant building. It's used for X, Y, and Z. It could be a nursing home, it could be a big furniture store, it could be a commercial space. Let's make apartments, right? In a great market when real estate values are very high, it's your best bet without breaking ground starting from scratch. There's a lot of tricky, pieces to this puzzle. It's not easy.
Hmm.
Some people go into it misinformed. Hopefully that they call a contractor, not me necessarily, but someone on early on to guide them and help them and make sure that they're doing the right decision. I think that there's a lot of opportunity there because as you and I, we live in Connecticut, you drive around, there are many cities with many vacant boarded up buildings, and people drive by like it's been sitting vacant for 10 years. No one could do anything with it. That's really where the value creation comes from. People like, I've been driving by this site for 20 years. I never thought about it. It's sitting right in front of your nose, but you need sometimes to look from outside the box, and there could be a lot of value there.
Yeah, absolutely. So it sounds like, the opportunity part of it is just the fact that Connecticut has a lot of old buildings that can be repurposed, and our general turnkey, or whatever you want to consider turnkey assets, are just topped out on prices. So it's hard to accumulate those, and have value add aspect to them. So, no, very good.
I
Um,
put it this way, it's a little bit thinking outside the box. A lot of people
yeah,
look, this is my buy box, this is my town, I look for X, Y, and Z. I think this is a little bit more like, okay, it's sitting vacant for so many years, and yes, many others have tried. How do we turn this around? How do we do that, And those that are successful at, thinking outside the box could do very well.
got it, got it. And kind of jumping, off the question for a little bit, but still it's tied to the same thing. Are you seeing that towns are there any incentives you're seeing, not necessarily specific to towns, but just in general in Connecticut, incentives to redevelop some of these, maybe, run down, commercial facilities, or underutilized commercial facilities to maybe be more residential, or, add more mixed use? Are you seeing anything like that?
So you'll definitely have some towns that are pro-development and some towns that are not pro-development. I think that's really one of the key things that we bring to the table is that we understand we've done work in over half the cities in Connecticut. So we understand certain towns are more business friendly, so some are not. So a developer will call us and say, okay, I have this in this property and this in this city. I may say, oh, there's a certain inspector there that's going to delay your project by 2 years. So just keep that in the back of your mind. So there's things like that, that if you have someone that's local, that's boots on the ground and knows the local politics, could help. We do this a lot. There are certain towns that really pro-development. They want people to come in. For example, we walked the building. The city of Bristol is put up for sale now, and I sat with the person in charge of development of the town. I was like, tell me, I understand that you have a big vacant, boarded up building in town, but tell me why or how are you ready to work with a developer to turn this around? It's a big partnership. It's a big building. You need tax incentives or whatever it is. And based on their answer, you could, the local politics, you could then understand, yes, they just want it off their, their budget or whatever expenses they carry for that property, or they really want the benefit of the city. So there are some, some and some. It's hard to say, a rule across the board. I don't want to
Sure.
badmouth certain towns because I don't want to end up on someone's chopping block, but there are many cities in Connecticut that say they want, properties redeveloped, but in reality, they just want someone else to have the headache of it, but they don't essentially want to see real growth there. And it's a lot of political reasons for it.
Yeah. And, sorry, I'm going off of the original questions we had in place because this is, super interesting. What are some of the, kind of indicators or red flags when you start to speak to some municipalities? You kind of get the feeling that they're not going to be good to work with. Any things they commonly do that you're like, this is a no go?
So it's more than that. Typically, the first thing we'll do if it's a city we never did work in, I'm going to speak to friends in the business. So we'll call up other people and say, hey, did you do work in this town? Give me your experience. Because I'll give you one example. The person that's sitting on the other side of the table may not be there when you break ground, right? If
Mm,
I go to this person in charge of housing and development in any city, sometimes they're voted people, sometimes they're hired by the mayor or whoever it is. They have great ideas. They may not be there when you need them. We bought a property in Middletown, Connecticut. We sat with the person in charge of housing and development for a long time. We spent over a year on before we purchased the property and closed on it and developed a set of plans. And actually, after I had, we were like waist deep in the project. The guy quit the city, and the city did not fill his position with someone else. It sort of piggybacked that position with someone else in the city. So it caused us a lot of grief, a lot of stress. It actually dragged the project on for about 2.5 years. And now, actually, because the project dragged on for so long, we ended up putting the property back on the market for sale just because we lost interest. There's a certain amount of energy and effort that takes to go into a property like that, to really like a heavy lift. And once you lose that momentum, it's very hard to get it back. Now, there's other ways to achieve that by basically bringing in new blood, bringing in a new partner. There's other ways to tackle that bird. Sometimes it's just better to say, I'll walk away from it, learn from the experience. I'm not sad that we're walking away from a property. To me, I look at it as everything I've learned adds to my checklist of things that I'll know for next time. But again, it's not about meeting the person in the city. They could promise you whatever they want. They have no skin in the game. Once they sell you the property, it's your headache. You own it. So it's
got
more
it.
about what else is going on in that city.
Very good answer. All right, so shifting gears a little bit. So your company, in terms of construction management, means a lot of things. One thing you guys do is, office and retail fit outs. What makes those, kind of diving into that, really quickly, to what makes those projects, difficult, or uniquely difficult than, maybe not than maybe, multifamily construction or other things you're working on?
Yeah, so the way I look at it is we look at it as a partnership. We work with owners. We work with developers. So we say we're not going to be a one-trick pony. We only do this item and that's it. We do industrial, we do commercial, we do residential. We've done it all. Not housing. We don't do residential, someone's personal residence, but we do a lot of multifamily. I think the biggest challenge we're seeing on industrial, on like fit outs. So let's talk about office and retail fit outs. Is essentially there's always a breakup in communication. You have a broker that brings a client to a landlord. The landlord commits to doing X, Y, and Z for the job, and then the tenant then goes and gets his contractor to finalize his fit out. What we're seeing a lot is the biggest slug, or the biggest slowdown in communication is essentially the number one mess up top project. If you have a landlord that hires us and he says, okay, I need to deliver the space with such condition, and then the tenant walks in and has a whole nother plan.
Mm.
Often we ask early on, we try to say, okay, let's get everyone into a room. But if there's sometimes you have two or three brokers in between and it's very difficult, maybe not practically, but for legal reasons, they don't want to bring their client, their tenant into the conversation because they're afraid that it might jeopardize the lease. And the brokers, with all due respect, they don't want to lose their possibility of getting paid. I think the number one thing is if you could bring everyone into a room early on and communicate effectively, that means you bring them into a room, you say, hey, this is what we were hired to do. This is the scope of work we planned. This is what the landlord told us to do, right? So if you have any objections or anything you want to add, now is the time. That is the number one issue that we're seeing across the board. The tenants that come to the table with the landlord, we meet in a room, we hash it all out. Those projects run smooth sailing. It's the ones that, it's a big corporation. They don't really know who's in charge and it's a lot of finger pointing. And then the landlord says, look, I have to deliver within 30 to 60 to 90 days. This is my time frame. Go start the work. Then, we're at the finish line. We're about to close up the walls. And the tenant's like, wait, who's doing low voltage? I need outlets, for the TV mounts. Like, wait, we didn't even
Mm.
know that there were going to be I don't know where your TVs are going to be. I was hired by the landlord. Now you're slowing me down. We just had a project we just finished in Danbury. And essentially the tenant's like, you got to wait. I got to make a plan. I'm like, wait, if the landlord doesn't deliver the space within 60 days, he's going to have a penalty for that. So we essentially have to bring everyone back to the table and say, everyone take a deep breath. Let's recalculate and let's finish this effectively so the tenant moves in and saves himself money, time, and energy. Remember,
Got
we're
it.
we're owners. We know what it's like. So I can only advise and say, guys, this is where you're going to have pitfalls. But if you don't
Mm.
listen, or you don't communicate well, or you don't bring everybody to the table, there's little I can do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. That's one thing. I mean, honestly, just in life, communication is key. It's priority because once everybody's on the same page, makes life a whole lot easier, and expectations are set way in advance versus
It sounds very easy in theory to do, but when there's multiple people involved and different people get paid differently. So you have brokers, you have the tenant, you have the tenant's rep. There's so many different levels of people that need to come into a room. It becomes very challenging, and we really chase it. We hunt them down. We say like, this is our best. It's in everyone's best interest, but often it's not so easy.
Yeah. Oh, very good. Very good. Where do you see the biggest opportunities and or landmines, for investors or developers, with construction heavy projects as we move out of 25 into 2026?
If I had to guess, like the number one landmine people are bumping into is a lot of assumption and not the right partnerships. We tell people when you're walking a building, when you're buying a building, when you're putting in a tenant, if you're unsure, bring a contract. Doesn't have to be me. Bring a contractor on early on. Build a relationship with your contractor. I think the old model used to be, you design a set of plans, you'd go bid it out to five contractors and the best price or whatever the sale was, that's your guy. I think people are starting to notice today that there's a lot of opportunity for failure. And it's far better to have a contractor in your space on your team early on. That means when you're designing the plans, when you're coming up with this idea, we do this a lot with brokers. We tell them, instead of you guessing, bringing in a client to rent a space and then everyone's guessing, we're going to spend X, or it's going to be 100 grand, it's going to be 200 grand. Why don't you bring a contractor on with the conversation and say, the tenant wants to build this, the landlord's going to deliver that. What do you think it's going to cost? Um, that's the number one landline we're seeing. That's the number of land. That's one second.
That's all. It's all good. Go for it.
That's the number one landmine we're seeing right now is where people don't bring on the right partnerships or the right advisors early on. So you're going to do a adaptive reuse. Don't just guess, throw numbers at the wall and then hope it sticks and then buy the property and find out that you're way under budget. Why don't
Mm.
you call a contractor and walk the building with them? We do this all the time. We walk with tenants, we walk with developers, we walk with landlords. We'll shop industrial buildings with people. This is your vision. Ask me or ask someone. Am I crazy? Is this number in the right ballpark? Does this work? Certain towns, I can tell you on 1 foot, you're never going to develop this unless you have a tax credit or a tax, some type of tax advantage, or you have some type of low income grant, or someone's going to help you fit the bill because the rents are not low, high enough. We're landlords. We know what the value is. Certain neighborhoods will tell you, this is a bad idea because of other reasons. Or certain markets will tell you, hey, that's a great idea. Here's the other challenge you have to think about. So you have to have the right partnerships early on. And we do this all the time. I think you asked about opportunity.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, I think a lot of opportunity is still coming due. We're still unsure. It's not the greatest feeling in the world that there's a lot of loans taken out 5 years ago with very, very low interest rates. I think that a lot of people are going to have to make hard decisions. How do they basically shed, bad debt and how that looks like? I don't really know. If I had all the right answers, become very, very wealthy.
Mhm.
Um, I don't have all those answers. I think as time goes on, we're seeing that there's a lot of people that were just uncertain, so they just froze and didn't do anything. I think now that there's a little bit more certainty in the market, we're seeing movement. How that plays out is yet to see. The people I can tell you about office, we're doing a lot of office fit outs. The guys that invest money in their office buildings and are really making their place shine. I wouldn't say, oh, class A, class B. It's really about reviving their offices. Those people we're seeing high occupancy rates filling up, getting to the 80, 90, even 95% occupancy rates on office buildings. Multifamily, I think, is still somewhat stable. Yes, the vacancy rate is up. Vacancy rate is going to really push a bunch of other factors, but it's slowly. There's a lot of new build and a lot of vacancy. Who knows where that's going to play out? But I think office is like a number one thing that everyone's wondering how it's going to play out. I can tell you right now, we're doing a lot of office fit outs for people that are investing in their lobbies and their amenity spaces. Those people are going to be successful.
Got it. And not to call out certain towns or regions, but in Connecticut, are there areas that are, more so, redeveloping their office spaces to accommodate, to bring in tenants? Like, is Fairfield County doing a bit more than Hartford County, or vice versa? Are you seeing any trends in terms of who's kind of actively updating their spaces in Connecticut?
I wouldn't say that it's more of a zone. I think it's more of a landlord. Like we're seeing certain
Got it.
people put money into their spaces and there's demand for it. I think there's always going to be demand for office. I think that, this idea that everyone's going to work from home and it's going to be kumbaya is not really practical. I mean, I used to work from home in 2020, 2021. It was a disaster. Like you never really go to work. Your kids bother you. It becomes a real nightmare, especially if you're in the middle of a call and somebody barges into your room screaming that they need some emergency. I think companies are also starting to notice that when the people went to work from home, they had 2 jobs or 3 jobs that they were really working from home. So, a lot of companies are demanding that, to create a good atmosphere in a company, you need to be in the office. Now, those companies have, they have leverage, they have options. So if you have a good space, we did work for a big office complex. And I don't know if I was in the meeting or I overheard the meeting, where essentially the tenant is basically renegotiating their lease. And the tenant's like, we have all these options. Why should we come re-sign and move back into this building? And the landlords are, because we put in a gym, we put in a sauna, a game room, all these great things. The tenant had no clue. The person signing the lease had no idea that we put in over, $2 million into their lobby, into their common areas. And they're like, are you serious? Like, where have you been for the last 2 years? They're like, yeah, we're working from home. So
Mm,
the guy's
yeah.
like, so the landlord turns to them and is like, we just spent millions of dollars on the building. Come check it out. And that was the end of it. The tenant signed right away. They re-signed. Like they were in theory going to start looking for a new office space. They put a whole bunch of money in the building, and the tenant like, wow, this place is beautiful. They haven't been there. They've been working. Most of the people are
Wow.
working from home. These are probably top executives that they never really stopped and checked out the office space. The people on the lower end of the spectrum, they knew, but they're not involved in this, conversation or this decision making. So that was very funny to see. Like if you put the money in, also make sure you articulate to the right people. Hey, by the way, we just finished a cafe in a building. I saw that the management sent out a nice email to all the tenants. Guys, we have a new cafe. It's all renovated. It's open. It's up and running. Here's the details. Sometimes you think like something so silly, like everybody knows it's open, right? You walk by it every day. Like, no, actually, the people that need to know don't know. They're not there. So that's another point that.
And it sounds like something, just the lack of communication in terms of updates in the building and announcing it to own it. A lot of times they probably don't think about it until it's time their leases. They're a year out, 6 months out from the lease due, and they're like, oh, and then they see all the options, not realizing what they have. But no, super good point. As we wrap up, what are 3 ways for an investor, developer, landlord to reduce renovation risk? as they require? What are top three ways you could say?
I think make sure you know your values. So you have to know your exit strategies. You need to have someone on your team that knows what it costs. There's no like guessing. If you're gonna just, the last five projects cost me X, there's no such a thing as buying a property sight unseen. You need to walk the space with someone that's qualified to make those decisions. You do that, you'll be okay. I think on the house, like on housing, you see that a lot. Like, brokers tell people, make sure you get a housing inspection, right? You have a home inspector come in and he does a full analysis. On multifamily, you'll have engineers walk the building to confirm that, that the bank is requesting, you need to have a property condition report. But very often, you don't see people walking with a contractor just to make sure that, hey, yes, we have a plan for the CapEx budget. Is this realistic? And then often they'll be like, wait, you're going to put a new roof, but you're missing, all these other items that are going to now be affected because they're changing those things. One time we were at a property and it was a heavy renovation. It was like a very, very intensive renovation. It was a very low income property and things were getting damaged, stolen and stuff like that. And we couldn't understand like what was going south. So we actually had somebody sleep on site on a property. And he calls us, it was like 1 a.m. or something, or 1:30 a.m. And he's like, I need you to look at my phone. We did a video call. It's like it was 1:30 a.m. and kids were riding around on their bikes and they were throwing stones. And it never left me. It's like there were times that we bought a property that we were unsure of, like, okay, you'll walk a property and you're like, how do you know what type of tenants live or what, this, you have questions. Go drive by the property at night or go to the property at night, and that will give you a good indicator of what really goes on after hours. I've seen this time and time again, where the property by day looks great, and by night it's a whole different ballgame.
Or sleeping at the property, that's taking it to the next degree.
It was a really rough neighborhood and it was a really rough property. So things were going south. We needed to know what goes on here at night because we just could not figure out how to really. It was an occupied building we were doing a lot of work on. We just could not figure out why do so many projects, like so many things, kept going south.
Got it. All right. No, cool. So we're done with all our big questions, and we're getting out of the business and kind of get into your personal really quick as we wrap up. When you're not in your construction management business, in your ownership, any development business, what are some of the things you enjoy doing?
I think that's the challenge. I think as a business owner, you're always like, when does that brain turn off? Sadly, it almost never does. But I try to find things and activities that, get the brain to turn off. Besides for being with my kids, I got five kids. I like riding motorcycles. We go shooting a lot here in the company. We have events where we go shooting, fishing, different things like that. Where I think it helps create company culture and it helps take the mind off things. I think that's very
Yeah,
important.
absolutely. Five kids. You got a crowd there. How can people find you and or get a hold of you?
So we're on all the social media platforms, upscalect.com, Upscale Construction. We're on Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn. We're all over the place. Just look us up, Upscale Construction.
And last question for you before we take off. Any final words for the audience?
A lot of people think that calling a contractor is like a big undertaking. Like I'm only going to call the contractor, when I have a project or once I need a price on something. It's really about building a relationship. And that's really what we pride ourselves in. It's like, call us before you have a project. Call us before you have all the specs and plans in place. You'll save a lot of time. You might find out there's a project you should never have done or never have
Mm.
gone down this rabbit hole just because it doesn't make sense. So we pride ourselves on relationship building, not so much, oh, here's a flat price, just get it off my head. It's not about shifting liability. It's about building relationships. Once you have a relationship, everything changes.
Good, very good. All right. Well, Dave, we all appreciate you. To our audience, thank you all once again for joining us for another episode of The Agent Investor. We want to wish you all the best in your health and happiness. And until next time, we'll see you then. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.